Hello, everyone. Tonight, let's travel far back in time to the riverbanks of ancient Egypt, a land famous for its pyramids, rulers called pharaohs, and a host of powerful gods who seemed always present. Yet, behind the golden masks and towering temples, life was much tougher than you might think. So, what if you had to spend just one day living in ancient Egypt? Let me assure you, the burning sun isn't the only thing you need to worry about. Before we begin, I invite you to support these stories only if they truly interest you, and feel free to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always amazing to see how many join us from different places. Now, dim your lights, perhaps switch on a gentle fan, and let's drift calmly into Egypt's ancient world, a place filled with pyramid silhouettes, devoted gods, and more sun than you can imagine. Even before the day starts, sunlight streams through your straw hut. No curtains, no window screens, and certainly no cool air. The desert heat comes straight through the walls, heating up every surface you touch, yourself included, as soon as breakfast arrives. You lie awake on a mat made of straw, draped in linen that does little to block the warmth. That refreshing Nile breeze you've heard about. It's gone, and probably disappeared centuries ago. When you finally step outside, you find the air is already stifling, close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sun is still climbing. In ancient Egypt, sunlight doesn't just shine, it scorches, turning your linen clothing into something as protective as a tissue in a steam room. Forget sunscreen, there's none available. There are no helpful creams, no wide-brimmed hats from a beach trip. Some people used special oils, but only those with money or sacred jobs could access them. For most, your only protection is a layer of mud or, rather reluctantly, crocodile dung. These might, just might, keep the sun off your skin. By noon, the ground is hot enough to cook on. Any bit of shade is precious. There are few trees, and even the mud brick walls that might block the sun feel warm to the touch. You look and feel like you've spent the morning in an oven. And complaining? Best not, because Ra, the sun god, is believed to be watching. Here the blazing sun isn't just weather, it's a sign of the god's will. If the heat becomes unbearable, well, that only means Ra's power is strong that day. So, to last even a single day, you'll need lots of water, patience, and the strength not to wilt under the heat. And that's just the start of your morning. Eventually, you leave your mat behind and you have some luck. The Nile is only a short walk away. The less fortunate news? You can smell its muddy banks before you even see the water. The Nile is truly the source of Egyptian life, worshipped as holy, the reason life exists here at all. But let's be honest, it smells a little sour, full of buzzing insects, frogs, and creatures you wish weren't crawling around. Still, this is where you wash. No bars of soap. They haven't been invented yet anyway, and you couldn't buy any if they were. So, how do you clean yourself? The answer is sand. You simply scrub down with whatever grains you can find, hoping it helps. It isn't pleasant, but it's the only way. Washing your clothes is much the same. You slap them against river rocks and hope no lurking crocodile mistakes your sheet for lunch. And we shouldn't forget, the Nile is everyone's river. People, animals, and even the occasional funeral procession head to its banks. The water sometimes carries runoff from all these sources, yet in most cases, this is the cleanest water you'll find. You finish up feeling only a little cleaner and only a little more anxious about leeches. If you live in a city, perhaps Memphis or Thebes, you might be lucky and use a public water trough or basin. For most, though, it's the river or nothing. There's no privacy. Everyone bathes here together, sharing the banks with their families, farm animals, and even birds hunting at your feet. You fill jars of water and carry them home, balancing them on your head before the afternoon sun starts baking the clay pots. This daily ritual is part of life, necessary and a bit overwhelming. The Nile truly is sacred. It offers food, helps you bathe, and quenches thirst, but it's not exactly crystal clear. It's part miracle, part challenge, and wholly essential. After enduring a muddy, buggy bath and scrubbing your skin nearly raw, it's time for breakfast, the most needed but least exciting meal of the day. Don't expect anything fancy. There are no eggs with sauce, no piles of fresh fruit, and definitely no cold coffee drinks. Here, breakfast is more about filling your stomach than pleasing your taste buds. You sit low to the ground, maybe on a stool if you have one, or you crouch in the corner. Your main food is bread, thick, heavy, and as chewy as an old sandal. Whether it's made from emmer wheat or barley, it's baked in ovens that might have visitors of the rodent kind. If there's a bit of gritty sand in your slice, that's normal. It sneaks in during the grinding process. Next comes the beer, but don't picture a crisp, bubbly drink. Instead, it's thick, warm, and more like porridge than any beer you know. It's less about taste, more about energy. A drink packed with calories but with a tang of sour grain. Everyone drinks it, including children, because the brewing process means it's safer than drinking the Nile itself. On a lucky day, you might have an onion or some dried fruit with your meal. If extra lucky, someone caught a fish and didn't eat it all themselves. You eat while brushing away flies. They think it's their breakfast, too. You manage the best you can, knowing this may be the most filling meal you'll have all day. Breakfast isn't for pleasure. It's for keeping you moving until bread makes an appearance again. Once you've eaten your coarse bread and murky beer, it's off to work. Ancient Egyptian labor would make anyone long for a modern office job. Unless you're a scribe, a priest, or rich, and most aren't. You spend your days using pure muscle and grit. There are no cool offices or coffee machines, just hard ground, hot sun, and a strong chance of exhaustion before lunchtime. If you farm, you're wading through Nile mud at sunrise, pulling weeds or planting grain under the sharp eye of an overseer who enjoys shouting commands. With only simple tools and your hands, you soon feel every ache in your back. If you build, the tasks are even heavier. Imagine dragging giant stone blocks in the open sun, barefoot, up ramps with nothing but determination. If you lose your footing, the injury is yours alone. Some work deep in tombs, chiseling rock for burials that offer peaceful rest to others, rest that you'll never see yourself. Do the job badly, and your reward might be trouble, or worse, punishment sealed inside the very tomb you worked on. Women's work is no different in terms of hardship. Grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, taking care of children, tending animals, and still helping in the field. Every bit is exhausting. There are no real breaks, just tiny moments between chores when you catch your breath. If you stop, someone else claims your share of food, and you risk blame for slowdowns. There is no end-of-day whistle. The setting sun is your only sign to finally go home, feeling like a layer of dust with tired feet hoping for softer shoes. Work in ancient Egypt isn't just tiring, it's relentless, a test of body and spirit that never lets up. If you think it should be safe to complain, think again. Here, words carry serious risk. The leader isn't simply a king, he's believed to be a living god, chosen by the heavens to maintain cosmic order. If the river floods well, the pharaoh gets praised. If not, people wonder if they prayed enough. Speaking badly or even questioning his rule is seen as not just rude, but dangerous, possibly answered with harsh punishment. His image is everywhere, carved in temples and painted on walls. To most, he's someone seen only from afar, passing briefly during ceremonies, surrounded by guards and grand displays. Those lucky enough to help on royal monuments, tombs, or statues are expected to serve with genuine devotion, at least publicly. It's much safer to pretend happiness while carving stone all day than to whisper any complaint. Uprisings were quickly and harshly ended. The message is clear. The pharaoh rules with divine right, and everyone else is fortunate just to be working in his name. As you go about your day, sand becomes your constant companion. It finds its way into your clothing, your bedding, your food. There is no escaping it. Whether you're working, praying, eating, or walking through the market, a sudden dry breeze will cover your skin and eyes in grit you never wanted. Linen clothes, although light and airy, do little to block the sand. It slips through the weave, clings to your body, and seems to travel everywhere. Your bread isn't just bread. It's flecked with sand from the millstones, and after years of eating it, people's teeth are worn flat. Your home is not safe from sand either. Mud brick walls have cracks and windows without glass. The wind whistling through brings the desert right inside. Barefoot most days, your feet quickly become as tough as old leather. If you have sandals, they're made of simple reeds, enough to walk, but not enough to shield you from sharp stones. Sandstorms are their own test. A sudden blast of wind and dust that steals all sight and turns everyone around you into coughing, stumbling shapes. Sand in Egypt isn't just scenery. It's part of your life, your food, your daily struggle. Washing it off never really works. It's always with you. In Egypt, religion isn't a Sunday practice. It's the foundation for daily life. Every action, from eating to working to washing up at bedtime, is shaped by rituals meant to please the many gods. Temples to all sorts of deities stand throughout towns, each responsible for different needs. Ra for the sun, Thoth for knowledge and the moon, Sobek as the guardian of the Nile, and Bastet, the cat goddess, keeping peace. Freedom takes a back seat to tradition. When you start the day, you thank Ra. If you spill a drink, you apologize to Hathor. Before meals, small offerings are made. Before sleep, there are prayers to ward off chaos. Even funerals are long, careful ceremonies, because the dead must prove their worthiness, ward off hostile spirits, and hope for a peaceful afterlife. Speaking of the afterlife, no culture took it so seriously. You don't simply die, you are judged. Your heart is weighed against a feather, and if it's heavy with regret or wrongdoing, a frightening beast awaits to devour your soul, ending all hope forever. Still, this system was meant as comfort, not threat. Egyptians believed that by following rituals and keeping to truth and order, you could enter a perfect eternity, surrounded by family, food, and peace. Of course, those with wealth received more attention from the gods. The temples were grand, priests powerful, and ordinary folks hoped for cloudless days. For Egyptians, faith touches every moment. It's not just belief, it's your job description and your hope for the world after this one. Let's say you hurt yourself, catch an illness, or simply feel exhausted. In ancient Egypt, there's no hospital like you know it. Medical care means a mix of herbal remedies, prayers, and hope. You go to a healer, who, for the time, knew impressive things. They could stitch wounds, set bones, and use tools. But science here is never alone. Every remedy includes a spell or prayer. For a wound, you might receive honey mixed with herbs. It's surprisingly effective against infection. But before this is applied, a charm is spoken, seeking to keep away evil spirits. A headache could be soothed with onion juice rubbed onto your scalp, along with a prayer. For chest pain, maybe a paste made of cow dung and fruit. Eye problems? Try a mix of lizard blood and beer, and yet another set of prayers. Surgery happened, but with no pain relief, and you'd need a friend to hold you steady while tools were used. Dental pain was worst of all. Teeth wore down quickly. If infected, your only choices were to suffer, risk death, or let it be pulled out with crude pliers. Charms and amulets hang on your neck for every health worry. A doctor would never ignore the spirit world. Egyptian medicine did have its clever solutions, but in the end, your main treatment was hope, belief, and a good wish. Now for something surprising. Women in ancient Egypt had rights some women in later times could only dream of. They could own land, manage a shop, divorce their husbands, and even stand in court. That sounds modern, right? But don't pack your bags for a trip back, because daily life was far from easy. Most women woke before the sun, grinding grain, fetching water, making food, tending to children, caring for animals, and helping in the fields. It was never ending. There was no break, no holidays, not even time off when having a child. Childbirth was dangerous, and while midwives were skilled, there were no painkillers or measures against infection. You gave birth in a small, hot room surrounded by hopes and incense. As for clothing, it was simple. Light linen dresses kept you cool, but there was no underwear, very little protection, and your feet, bare like everyone else's, felt every stone and burnt sand. If you used makeup, it was made with lead and applied with little sticks. If you were born fortunate, life had brighter sides. You might read, keep household accounts, or be a priestess. Even become pharaoh, like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra. But for most, the law said you could have power, while practicality tied you to endless chores and worry, working, caring, birthing, and struggling to survive. Still, having any rights at all made ancient Egyptian women stand out among their peers around the world. After enduring a full day, eating coarse food, carrying heavy jars, avoiding angering the gods, and perhaps ducking the odd sandstorm, you'd hope for rest. But in Egypt, the real test was just beginning. Death was not the finish line. It was merely the first step on a complicated journey through the next world. After taking your last breath, your spirit traveled to a grand hall where you declared one by one all the good things you did not do. I did not steal. I did not tell lies. I did not covet my neighbor's donkey. And you hoped the gods listening believed you. Then your heart was weighed against a feather, the symbol of justice and truth. If your heart was light, you earned peace. If heavy, you met Amit, a frightening creature ready to end your existence forever. In a land obsessed with life after death, being erased in this way was a final sorrow. You could fail not just by actions, but by forgetting a single word during this judgment, with no chance to correct your mistake. But if you passed, eternal life awaited, a gentle world of endless Nile banks, feasts without hunger, fields with no sweat, and calm sun. The only catch, the journey was filled with dangers, solved only with careful preparation, tombs, prayers, magical texts, and offerings to smooth your way. For all that, if there was one comfort, it was in your linen clothes. Everyone wore them, cool, loose, and airy, letting you breathe in the heat. But that's where comfort stopped. Most wore the same outfit every day, a short wrap for men, a plain dress for women. Laundry, done in the Nile by hand, was a chore in itself, with hopes that no animal interrupted. Shoes were rare. Sandals made of reeds were saved for special occasions, or for priests. Most went barefoot, walking everywhere with sand and pebbles pressing into their skin. Jewelry and amulets were common, but usually for showing status or attracting good luck, not for beauty alone. Eyeliner, made from powdered dark stone, helped shield the eyes from the glare and illness. Though the outfits were simple and better suited for the heat than what the Romans would later wear, it didn't matter how elegant you looked, because the sun, labor, and endless bugs paid no mind. If you managed to finish a single Egyptian day, hauling heavy loads, battling sandstorms, and hoping your clothes lasted, keep in mind, survival was always uncertain. Most people didn't live beyond their mid-30s. Let's look at why. Surviving childhood was an accomplishment in itself, with sickness and accidents common. By your teens, you'd have adult responsibilities, marriage, work, and raising children. Life was always ticking, with dangers everywhere, from snakes to infection, childbirth to unsanitary food. If you fell ill, healing was mostly trust in gods, honey cures, and luck. But in Egypt, people didn't fear death. They planned for it. those with more resources prepared tombs filled with items they'd need: jewelry, jars of food, perfumes, statues, and little dolls to work for them in the afterlife. Their bodies were wrapped and salted, placed in colorful coffins along with scrolls of guidance, maps and spells for the next world. Most people, though, had much simpler burials: a cloth wrapping, a pot or two, and a dream of reunion in the fields of paradise. Even the poorest hoped for peace in the next world. Even after death, peace wasn't guaranteed. Tombs filled with precious objects attracted thieves. Kings and nobles were buried with treasures: gold, oils, jewelry, carved chests, and even miniature boats. Hiding tombs, painting curses on walls, and building secret entrances didn't stop thieves, who sometimes included those trusted to build or tend the tombs. Punishment for being caught could be terrible, yet in times of famine or crisis, even commoners' graves were disturbed, with offerings taken for survival. Robbery was not always about greed. Sometimes it was about staying alive during hard years. In Egypt, not even death was certain protection. The legacy of ancient Egypt lives on not only in stone monuments, but in the writing they invented. Hieroglyphs decorate tombs and temples, rows of birds, flowers, eyes, and people walking sideways. These figures were more than decoration. They were a whole language, with hundreds of symbols standing for sounds, ideas, or extra meaning. Reading and writing hieroglyphs was not for everyone. Only about 1% of the people learned them, almost always by joining strict schooling for scribes. These students spent years copying symbols until their hands ached. But becoming a scribe was worth it, for scribes kept records, managed taxes, wrote letters and religious words, and they didn't have to build or farm under the blazing sun. For most, writing was seen as magic. To name something in writing was to make it eternal. To erase a name was to erase a soul. So what may look like simple drawings was a powerful, complex tool, one that took years of practice and was respected by all. So, after hearing about Egypt's dust, heat, endless chores, and spiritual worries, would you get through a day? For many of us today, it's unlikely. It's easy to imagine ancient Egypt as filled with beauty. Golden tombs, perfumed air, graceful paintings, and a world obsessed with order. But behind the wonders were lives shaped by daily struggles. Most days began on a dirt floor, surrounded by insects, working all day to earn enough to eat. Walking barefoot, hauling water, cooking over fire, sharing space with animals, worries about illness, spirits, wild snakes, or unfair rulers were always close. There was no toothpaste, no medicine, no escape from whatever life you were born into. Your role was fixed: scribe, farmer, laborer, mother, or servant. And still, Egyptians found ways to enjoy life, through faith, family, dance, song, and festivals, through laughter, art, and the remarkable buildings that remain even now. But for someone from today, without our modern comforts and medicines, the first real sandstorm might send you running. So perhaps we couldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, but they lasted for thousands of years, which is why their story endures. Now, let's step away from Egypt. Across the world, in the heart of ancient Teotihuacan, there stands a pyramid unlike any other. Its walls are not decorated with peaceful symbols, but with rows of stone serpents, mouths open wide. This is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, a place known as the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. Unlike other temples which reach for the heavens, this one seems almost threatening. The carved heads are not simply artwork. They seem to warn those who approach. Long ago, under their watchful gaze, something truly unsettling took place. Over the last few decades, scientists digging beneath the temple have found not just precious gifts, but signs of sorrow. Hundreds of human skeletons. Many of them were young men, hands bound, sometimes decapitated. Some wore necklaces made of human teeth or jewelry from jawbones. Each was placed carefully in a deliberate pattern as part of a ceremony that required tremendous sacrifice. Why such a terrible ritual? The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not just a holy place. It was a seat of power, a stage where the city's rulers used ceremonies, warfare, and awe to maintain control over a city of more than 100,000 people. These acts, so shocking to us, were seen as essential to keeping the world itself in order. Standing before this temple, you sense you're being watched. The serpents remind you this was a place where the gods were not just worshipped, but feared, and where people believed the survival of the world depended, at times, on human offerings. But who were the people who created and vanished, leaving only these stones behind? Their story began long before the Aztecs, before the Maya, in a city whose original name remains a mystery. Teotihuacan, meaning the place where gods were born, in later Aztec language, was one of the largest cities in its time, rivaling ancient Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an. Thoughtfully laid out, with broad roads, stone apartments for large families, and 3 huge pyramids, the moon, the sun, and the feathered serpent at its heart. One of Teotihuacan's great mysteries is just who built it. We still don't know the names of its founders or what they called themselves. There are no surviving records and no inscriptions to reveal their kings. It seems society may have been led by groups or councils, not individual rulers. Despite their anonymity, their influence spread far. Objects from Teotihuacan, ceramics, blades, even evidence of their presence, are found hundreds of miles away, where they likely shaped politics and trade throughout ancient Mesoamerica. How did a city with no written language keep such a hold over distant lands? The answer may lie in how its leaders used religious beliefs and public ceremonies to weave together state power. Temples were built not just as places to pray, but as reminders of cosmic order, alignments with the stars, spaces for ceremonies including sacrifices, and ever-present symbols of the city's unique power. At the center, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was dedicated to an extraordinary being. The Feathered Serpent, known later as Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs and Kukulkan to the Maya. This god's meaning is full of contradiction and wonder. As a serpent, it belonged to the earth and underworld, symbolizing death and renewal. As a bird, it reached the skies, standing for life, wind, and divinity. To blend these opposites, sky and earth, life and death, was to create a god who connected worlds. The temple's surface is covered with carvings, dozens of wide-eyed, open-mouthed serpents with feathers. Some say they show the god himself. Others think they depict honored priests or warriors. Either way, they are everywhere, a reminder that the feathered serpent is always present. This god was not only about the skies, but deeply involved in rituals of life and death. Many stories tell how he brought life by going into the underworld and bringing back bones, but always at a cost. In some tales, even the gods themselves had to offer sacrifices for the world to continue. In Teotihuacan, it seems people did the same, offering the greatest gifts they could, not only food, but life itself. The temple was not just a place to worship, but a carefully built symbol expressing a complex logic, mixing order and chaos, sky and ground. Underneath, archaeologists have found chambers filled with carefully laid bones and precious offerings. These weren't the random remains of battle. They were part of a planned design, with victims arranged according to the 4 directions, their numbers and positions reflecting cosmic patterns. Many of the young men sacrificed wore necklaces of bones, were bound at the wrists, or were decapitated. Tools used in the rituals, and other symbolic items like jaguar bones and precious shells surrounded them. The deeper the dig, the more they found. Some rooms were lined with shining minerals, with floors that glimmered like water or the night sky. Each discovery made it clear. This temple was not just built on top of death, it was built to hold it within, layer upon layer, as the city reached toward the heavens. In the end, both Egypt and Teotihuacan remind us, beneath their grand monuments, both lands were built on layers of struggle, hope, faith, and sometimes sorrowful sacrifice. Their surviving stones are not just reminders of past glory, but a call to remember the real, complicated lives that shaped their world. Blood didn't end up on the stone by chance. The stone was shaped to receive it, every drop an offering to the gods. If you take a closer look at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, you'll notice something unsettling. The temple doesn't simply rest on the earth. Its position reaches out to touch the sky. Teotihuacan wasn't planned on a whim. The whole city was designed according to exact celestial patterns. The long avenue of the dead is tilted 15 degrees from true north, not by error, but by careful aim. This angle might match the setting of the Pleiades or track the sun on sacred days. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent rises right along this path, locked inside a vision that ties earth and stars together. But why? What purpose did this alignment serve? For years, experts have argued about what the temple points to. Some say it welcomes the equinox sunrise, while others believe its connection is to Venus, the planet so revered by ancient peoples of this land. Venus, which they linked to war, sacrifice, and renewal. When Venus appeared or vanished, battles might begin. Gifts would be offered, and torchlight would fill the temple. Even the temple's size and form seemed chosen with care. The repetition of the number 7, for the 7 wanderers of the sky, appears in its terraces, showing a grasp of both earthly mathematics and heavenly rhythms. Beneath the ground, there are even more mysteries. In 2003, a team uncovered a tunnel below the temple. Not a simple dugout, but an underground realm designed with intention. The passage was finished with powdered pyrite, sparkling like stars in the darkness. Pools of mercury and glittering walls gave the whole space a sense of walking through the galaxy. Perhaps a road to the world below, or maybe a path to new life. So, was this just a place for blood? Or was it much more? An engine that linked earth and sky, body and spirit? Many believe the people of Teotihuacan saw time not as a straight line, but as a circle. Every ritual, every stone, every sacrifice folded into an endless return. Death was followed by renewal, and the flow of blood brought forth new beginnings. Maybe the temple's alignments helped mark the movements of stars, the right time to bring in the crops, and, most importantly, the right moment to offer life. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent did not only look up at the heavens, it tried to speak directly to them. It served not just as a spiritual lighthouse, but as a tool for power. Its very appearance was meant to impress, to awe, and to remind both visitor and resident exactly who held sway in Teotihuacan. Imagine arriving there 1,800 years ago, coming from a smaller city. You make your way up the Avenue of the Dead, amazed by Teotihuacan's size. Then you reach the Temple of the Feathered Serpent and stop in your tracks. The serpent faces, jaws open, watch you. Stone jaguars crouch, forever waiting. The large plaza ahead could fill with crowds, not only for festivities but for displays of sacred ritual. You might even see an offering that required a life. Those who held power here understood something key. Fear brings control, and nothing inspires fear like the anger of the gods. Public ceremonies, acts carried out with dazzling headpieces, smooth obsidian masks, and rhythmic dance, were part of a careful display. Myth made real in front of every onlooker. This was not chaos, but careful drama. The rulers wanted all to remember. They alone could ask the skies for rain, shelter their people, or summon down destruction. The design of the temple even helped press this message. From the upper spots, leaders could watch the plaza below, holding both the story and the gathering in their grasp. People gazed up, at the gods, at their rulers, at the ritual, and understood their place. For those from outside, Teotihuacan had no need for armies. Its message was clear in stone and blood. Visitors would leave with tales of the feathered serpents, the never-ending roads, the crimson rituals that touched the sky. In a world commanded by divine might, Teotihuacan made itself the chosen voice of the heavens, and the temple of the feathered serpent was the strongest word spoken. At its height, Teotihuacan pulsed as the center of ancient Mesoamerica, a city of flame, stone, gods, and sacrifice, one that looked unshakable. Yet, around the year 550, everything began to shift. A hush crept over the city as enduring as the temple's stone faces. Teotihuacan's fall was not instant or glorious. It came slowly, then all at once. Warning signs appeared decades before as the old rhythms began to falter. There's evidence of drought, crops failing, and growing unrest. The strong central control, religious ceremonies, and the grand cosmic order all began to strain. And then, the fires. Archaeologists have found thick layers of burning across noble homes, temples, and offices. Even the temple of the feathered serpent shows scars of fierce destruction. Strangely, ordinary neighborhoods were mostly spared. This wasn't an attack from outside. It looks like rebellion, arising from within. Perhaps those who once watched, awestruck as the priests led the ceremonies, now turned against their leaders. The temple, once the sign of holy power, was stormed. Sculptures were smashed, flames swallowed sacred rooms, and hallowed spaces were ruined. Then, silence fell. Teotihuacan was not abandoned in a single night, but its spirit faded. Trading paths closed, artists stopped their work, rituals ended, and the rulers vanished. The temple lost its voice, but mystery clung to the ruins. The city faded, but the memory lingered. Centuries later, newcomers arrived, the Aztecs. They came to the empty valley and found the city's remains. Struck with awe, they were certain only gods could have created it. They called it the place where gods were born. The pyramids became sacred again, though they knew nothing of the first builders. For the Aztecs, the temple of the feathered serpent was no simple ruin, but a vessel of deep and hidden power. Yet the greatest irony remains. The mightiest city of its era, grounded in order and sacrifice, disappeared with no record, no writing, leaving only hushed stones and lingering doubts. The gods, it seemed, had left the temple in silence. For more than 1,000 years, the temple of the feathered serpent lay undisturbed, covered in dust, buried by volcanic ash, avoided by locals and passed by farmers. It became a forgotten place, crushed by time, until archaeologists, in the modern era, began to dig into its core. In the early 1900s, Mexican explorers started to uncover Teotihuacan. What they found was remarkable. A city so well built, it predated the Aztecs by centuries. It wasn't until more recent decades, though, that the temple gave up its most private and chilling mysteries. One of the most extraordinary moments happened in 2011. Beneath the temple, researchers discovered a tunnel that had been sealed off nearly 1,800 years before, as if placed under lock and key for all time. After long searches, what they found was astonishing. A hidden passage meant to be a world below, dusted with glittering pyrite to shimmer like the night. Pools of mercury and thousands of ceremonial items, green stone figures, rubber spheres, sharp obsidian, and masked images, called out from the dark. The tunnel felt less like a grave and more like a message. Why go to such lengths? What were these builders hoping to preserve or conceal? Some say the tunnel hosted rites of passage. Others see it as a symbol of creation itself, a sacred space where gods first entered the world, where rulers were shaped, where the order of the universe was settled. The mercury, long thought to be only dangerous, might have stood for water or for the mysterious border between worlds. And throughout these discoveries, a repeating hint remained. The feathered serpent's presence still lingered, not just in stories, but in the art, the carvings, and the very shapes of the temple. The serpent had not gone. It had only coiled deeper, waiting within the bones of the city to be discovered again. And each time a relic emerges from the darkness, a piece of bone, a golden piece, a curious jaw, we come a bit closer to its message. It's a message not written in words, but hammered in stone, about sacrifice, memory, and shadow. Today's tools let us scan below the earth, use drones to look from above and peer inside with special rays. But even with all this, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent keeps its secrets. Now, it stands as a quiet monument, a reminder not only of a vanished way of life, but of a powerful link between ritual, the heavens, and the end of life. People take pictures. Children dart past the serpent sculptures. Yet beneath them, the ground holds hundreds of stories and 200 known sacrifices. The temple's story isn't just about architecture. It's about the mind, the spirit, the very soul of a people. The feathered serpent, a god joining earth and clouds, continued to change and grow. It would be celebrated by later cultures, taken up by the Toltecs, reborn by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, who would become not just a bringer of sacrifice, but a keeper of wisdom and one day, a god who wept for humankind and promised to return. This recreation of the serpent's story shows us something essential. Legends don't die, they shift with us. In modern Mexico, old echoes of the serpent appear again, in images on coins, painted across walls, woven into the fabric of the nation's identity. But the temple offers another inheritance, something harder to face. It asks us to look closely at what it cost to believe. How far will people go to feel close to the divine? What happens when power and faith become one? Can beauty exist side by side with dread? In this way, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent isn't just a thing of the past. It's a mirror we hold to ourselves. It speaks to our questions about what happens after we die, our deep-seated longing for meaning, our urge to reach for both wonder and control, and our history of painting beauty with tragedy. The temple teaches a difficult lesson, that greatness brings its shadows, that civilizations can rise far above the ordinary while hiding secrets underneath their stones. Perhaps that's why we can't stop returning, to look, but also to learn. Because somewhere inside, we sense the serpent is still there, not waiting to attack, but quietly watching, reminding us of who we were and who we can be. Long before we wrote words, we created rhythm. Tens of thousands of years ago, even before full language existed, early people began to make sounds that carried purpose. Not speech nor song, just rhythm, the touch of a hand on tree bark, the tap of wood on stone, the steady beat of a foot on the ground. Somewhere in that patient repeating, something truly remarkable was born. The first drum. There was no music by name, no titles, only the sense that this was something more, a way to share, to move, to feel. Anthropologists have found the earliest simple drums dating back beyond 30,000 years. They were made from what the earth offered: hollowed trunks, dried plants, stretched skins. Humble things, not made to last, yet deeply important. These were not toys. They sent warning, called people together, or linked the living with something greater than themselves. Picture a group scattered in a thick forest. One distant beat, and all knew to come close, celebrate, or be alert. The drum shared news, fear, and hope. Early drums became part of each person, a heartbeat carried out into the world, a living pulse that moved through valleys and across time. Drumming wasn't a performance you simply watched or heard. It was something everyone joined in, around the warmth of fire, under the night sky, in hidden caves where echoes filled the air. Through these shared rhythms, feelings took shape, not by words, but by pattern and sound. Long before there were flutes or strings, the drum was alive, shaping our sense of time, guiding our gatherings, bringing individuals together as one. The drum became not only our first instrument, but our first way of belonging. No matter where people lived, they created something to strike, to tap, to beat, because even without words, we all had rhythm. And that was everything. As cultures grew, the drum was never just a tool. It became sacred. Every group, every settlement had their own style, yet the goal was almost always the same: reaching out to the unseen. In Africa, among the earliest homes of the drum, rhythm shaped every part of life: birth and death, memory and hope. The djembe, sculpted from a single tree and wrapped in animal skin, was believed to contain the life of tree, animal, and maker. 3 spirits, 1 voice. Played in circles, the drum was not just a support for ceremonies. It became the heart of the ritual. There were also talking drums, able to echo human speech in rhythm and pitch. In West Africa, these drums sent signals across the horizon, sharing news of joy or danger when words would never reach. Across the seas, the peoples of the Americas honored the drum as a living being. For many, it represented the pulse of the earth itself. Played in rites to remember ancestors or heal the body, the powwow drum was a central song for both life and spirit. Australian Aboriginal peoples used clapsticks and percussive movements in the Dreamtime, the era when the world was made. Arctic shamans struck small frame drums to seek guidance or call for healing in the long northern dark. None of these rhythms were meant for display alone. They were acts of memory, survival, and connection. Drumming always drew people into circles, blending hearts and intentions. Without written notes or stages, only the living presence, the striking of hands, and the stirring of community. Wherever you heard a drum in the distance, you knew something sacred was underway, something that no word could ever express. On fields of battle, as in sacred circles, the drum has always spoken, sometimes in comfort, sometimes in command. As societies changed and empires rose, the drum grew into a tool of authority. Armies didn't have radios to guide them. They had drums. In ancient China, massive instruments called bo were struck, drawing armies into charge or retreat. Each signal had meaning, and soldiers trained their ears to hear through the chaos. In Mesopotamia, drums called people to rulers, but also thundered over city walls in times of war, shaking enemy courage. When Roman armies gathered, the tympanum lent the event's order, not heard much in war, but powerful for ceremony, marking the presence of empire. None, perhaps, used drumming for power like the Ottoman Empire, whose great meter bands rocked the earth with waves of drums and cymbals before battle. A sound so overwhelming it would freeze some opponents with fear. Even off the field, in royal courts across continents, drums announced arrivals, marked the rise of rulers, and underlined moments of change. To play a drum was to announce with clarity that power had arrived. Enslaved people brought to the Americas also used drums in their struggle, to keep traditions alive and sometimes to signal secret plans. Even in the darkest times, rhythm could not be silenced. In every corner of the world, the drum's beating said, "This is who leads, this is who marches, this is the rhythm of control." As centuries passed, the drum's story branched out with each society. In the East, drums became tied to ceremony, meditation, and spiritual detail. In the West, they became stronger, more organized, fueling soldiers and, later, great orchestras. Two paths, one pulse. In India, the drum became an expression of the divine. The tabla, bright and flexible, played both in sacred spaces and classical shows. Each touch, named and practiced, built a language of rhythm, more spoken than played. Mastery took years, but the drummer became both musician and storyteller. In Japan, great taiko drums thundered in gatherings, rituals, and battle. Playing taiko was a matter of physical control and focus, almost martial in spirit. The sound of taiko traveled over mountains, believed by some to invite gods to earth. In Indonesia, the kendang led gamelan groups, guiding temple dance with patterns that echoed cosmic harmony. In Europe, the drum's place was practical for most of history, a tool for soldiers, a keeper of time. Only in later ages did it step into refined music, slow to rise from the background. You can see in this difference each region's view. The East approached rhythm as art and prayer, tying it to breath and chant, while the West used it as measure and order. Through both, the drum claimed a central role, listening, leading, always present where people gathered and where prayer was spoken. From mountain peaks to jungles, from desert fires to church candles, the drum bridges the worldly and the spiritual. Long before formal religion appeared, rhythm was already a kind of prayer, a way to call down the mystery of existence. In African traditions, some drums were treated as living souls. In Yoruba belief, the bata drum communicated with spirits and ancestors, and the drummer was a priest, weaving prayers in every beat. In Hindu stories, the god Shiva, as the cosmic dancer, holds a tiny drum whose pulse marks the very creation and destruction of the world. In Buddhist temples, framed drums guide meditation, holding the worshiper in the present with quiet, steady touch. In the Americas, indigenous groups turned to drums for vision, healing, and memory, their steady rhythm echoing the womb, guiding journeys of the spirit. Even in Christianity, often cautious about rhythm, drums found a home in gospel, especially within black churches. Here, drumming lifted voices, marked hope and loss, and gave shape to worship. Across every faith, the drum has not been extra or ornamental. It has been the heart of ritual, of focused energy and mystery, the one part of prayer that never disappears. For thousands of years, the drum traveled alone. One person, one sound. But when the industrial age arrived, all of that changed. In workhouses, on busy streets, and in lively music spaces, percussion was brought together into something new, the drum set. The drum kit appeared because of need. In late 19th century bands, space and cost meant different parts had to be played by one performer. Around 1909, the first bass drum pedal was created, letting a drummer strike with the foot and free their hands for more. From there, more pieces were added, toms, cymbals, smaller drums, and bells, until one person could sound like many. This was more than just a tool. It was a seat of power for the drummer. Then came jazz. In the packed, smoky clubs of New Orleans and Chicago, the kit became an instrument for telling stories. Jazz drummers added subtlety and swing, turning rhythm into art. As rock emerged, drum kits grew bigger and louder, and drummers began to step out in front. Today, the drum kit lives everywhere, in churches, dance halls, concert arenas, and on stages both humble and grand. Even the rise of electronic drums and digital sounds has not replaced the feeling that comes from hands and sticks against real skins. The drum set remains a symbol of mixing old traditions and new voices, a place where a single player can speak in many rhythms at once. Everywhere on Earth, the drum finds a home, shaped and tuned by local hands. Each style is different, a unique sound belonging to a unique people. In West Africa, the djembe's talking voice joins with the dunun's deep anchor, making music into shared experience, a conversation with the living and the past. In the Middle East, the darbuka's clear, quick tone drives both dance and classical music, calling listener and player into tight, precise connection. Across Latin America and the Caribbean, drums like the conga and bongo blend roots from many cultures, singing in rituals and festivals as well as on city streets. Brazil's samba echoes through carnival. Cuba's bata drums call to the divine, and every region has its own unique rhythms. India's mridangam and tabla keep classical music alive, their notes tuned and careful as sung melody, every tap passing down heritage. Frame drums, some of humanity's oldest, appear everywhere, from Persian daf to Irish bodhran to tools of shamanism, played in every imaginable way. Despite their differences, all these drums share a purpose, whether to dance, to inspire, to heal, or to call for change. Each one is the heart of its own people, carrying their memories and stories. As the 20th century came to a close, the drum's sound began to shape-shift. Real skins and hands gave way to wires and screens, and soon the digital drum arrived. This new age began in the 1970s with early drum machines. Their first simple sounds were mechanical and cold, but they promised something new: endless rhythms, steady repeats, and creative freedom. Then in 1980, a machine called the TR-808 changed everything. Its booming beats and crisp pulses helped invent entire new forms of music, from hip-hop to dance and beyond. Instead of copying old drums, it created a whole universe of new sound. Today, electronic drums let players mix natural movement with digital flexibility. Computer programs let anyone with passion create complex layers of rhythm at home. Even finger drumming has grown into an art form of its own, played on tiny pads linked to computers. Some people feared that machines would end the magic of true drumming, but that has not happened. Instead, both forms work together, the human with the mechanical, the ancient with the ultra-modern. Digital drums haven't replaced tradition. They have reimagined it. Now, someone alone in their room can make music that once took a whole group, and ancient rhythms from every part of the world can be remixed for new audiences. The technology has changed, but the heart remains the same: to move us, to shape time, to let silence itself speak. Through every moment in history, through change and invention, the drum still calls out with the same lasting voice. From the first circles around fire to stunning performances in modern halls, from ceremonies to rebellion, the drum is more than music. It's a thread that binds us to each other and to our own past. It's the heartbeat that links us all, not just as a symbol, but as a real thing. Before we're ever born, the steady rhythm we first hear is the pulse of our mother's heart. From the moment we enter the world, we chase that pattern, finding it in joy, in grief, in memory. The drum stands with us, for celebration, for loss, for remembrance. Today, rhythm still grows and changes. On city streets, handpans bring new sounds to life. In distant villages, old ways are kept alive against all odds. In stadiums, drums rally crowds to cheer as one. Children bang kitchen pots, finding rhythm by instinct. Even machines are learning to tap out beats, but no algorithm can replace the soul in a single imperfect note. Rhythm is felt before it's counted. Perhaps that's why drums last longer than any empire or fashion. Deep down, we crave the shared anchor of time, a sense that we're all together now. And no matter how far technology takes us, nothing will ever match the power of hand against drum, of a simple beat that marks a new beginning. The drum is not just a reminder of what once was. It's a guiding mark that shows us we are meant to move, to listen, to join, and to play. Wherever people remain, the drum will never be silent. Before Manhattan grew into a forest of shining buildings, it was an island of sunlight and low rooftops. In the early 1800s, the city hugged its southern edge, a crisscross of brick row houses, wooden shops, and muddy roads. Most buildings barely reached 6 stories, not for lack of desire, but because gravity made each extra floor a costly risk. The taller the structure, the greater the load below. Each new story needed thicker walls and deeper foundations, which made tall buildings expensive and rooms small. So New York expanded outwards. The city grew north along a grid marked out in 1811, a bold plan for a city yet to come. Beneath the surface, though, Manhattan was quietly preparing. Deep under earth and stone, its granite base slept. One day, this bedrock would hold up some of the tallest towers the world had ever seen. For now, life was bustling, but low. The harbor was a swarm of ships. Horses rattled through narrow streets. People poured in, the city hummed, but the sky stayed empty. Only church spires broke the horizon. The greatest of these was Trinity Church, whose steeple stood 280 feet tall, for a while the city's tallest point. Few could guess that iron, steel, and new dreams would soon lift the skyline to unimagined heights. For centuries, gravity's grip shaped Manhattan, keeping ambition on the ground. Then, in the mid-1800s, 2 discoveries would finally open up the sky. One carried people upwards, the other let buildings soar. The first breakthrough came in 1852, when Elisha Otis introduced his safety elevator. At the New York Crystal Palace, he staged a dramatic test, cutting the rope on a platform high overhead. The safety device worked, and the platform stuck in place. Suddenly, reaching the top floors of buildings was not just safe, but desirable. Attic rooms became the prized spaces, filled with light and air. The city could finally rise. Yet, one problem remained. Height depended on heavy walls, limiting how far buildings could go up. This changed when engineers began using steel frames at the end of the 1800s. Thin walls could now hang on strong skeletons, shedding weight and freeing space inside. Tall buildings were no longer risky. They became practical. With elevator and steel, Manhattan was at last ready. Its solid bedrock, tight land, and booming economy drove architects to think upward. Every bank, every newspaper, every business wanted to be visible above all others. Height became both a sign and a tool. No longer was the race sideways. Now it would be straight up. By the 1890s, New York could no longer stretch outward, so it started to climb. With new technology in hand, Manhattan became a contest of ideas and means. In 1890, the New York World Building rose 20 stories, at that time the tallest office structure on Earth. For a moment. The Park Row building soon overtook it, marking the skyline with spires of ambition. Every new tower announced, "This is the future." The skyline filled with iron and glass. The Singer Building, finished in 1908, stood above even Trinity Church, which had reigned for over half a century, but it too was quickly surpassed. In 1913, the Woolworth Building soared to 792 feet, mixing Gothic grace with modern power. The Woolworth wasn't only tall, it was a symbol, a cathedral of commerce, paid for in cash. This was more than building for shelter. It was building for legacy. Firms competed to stand apart, crowding the skyline with landmarks that would outlast them all. Each new height became a symbol and a statement. The spires shouted success. Beneath all this, laborers dug deep into stone, planting steel roots. Workers balanced high overhead, building a dream with every rivet. The Manhattan skyline was starting to become real, a living monument to progress. As the 1920s arrived, the skyline didn't just climb, it danced. Art Deco came to New York, and towers took on curves, chevrons, and shimmer. The era's best-loved creation was the Chrysler Building, completed in 1930. For a short time, it stood taller than any other, its secret spire hoisted overnight, shining like a jewel. Ornamental eagles swept out from the corners, and the building's lines mirrored the speed and hope of the machine age. It didn't just brush the clouds, it embraced them. But the race for height was not over. Only blocks away, the Empire State Building began its rapid rise. Completed in 1931 in the midst of the Depression, it stretched to 1,250 feet. Taller than anything before, built in just over 1 year. The Empire State wasn't a simple building. It was a message. New York would keep rising, even in hard times. In these years, towers became more than tools. They told the city's story, graceful yet bold, modern, but always striving for myth. And behind every graceful line was a drive for permanence, a hunger to be remembered. By the end of the 1930s, Manhattan's outline had been drawn. The city stood as a testament to possible futures, not only a capital of trade, but a cathedral for every kind of hope. After the Second World War, the city's skyline began to change tone. Art Deco's curves gave way to straight edges and smooth glass. America's role on the world stage now called for new forms. The United Nations headquarters rose, boxy and bright, on the river's edge, a signal of new international order. The Lever House and Seagram Building soon followed. Steel and glass, precise and plain, careful not to decorate or distract. These buildings, shaped by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's strict design, set a new standard. Function replaced flourish. Power now whispered. It didn't roar. Business was booming, and Midtown became the core for banks, law firms, media, and more. Office towers competed for presence and practicality. Gone were towers chasing beauty. In their place, modern slabs stood tall, reflecting clouds and ambitions alike. Yet even among all this shining uniformity, the skyline kept its status. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about presence. The city's controls grew, but its story still showed in steel. Then, in the late 1960s, the city was ready for one more great leap. At the southern tip, a pair of matching buildings would forever change the view. The twin towers of the World Trade Center, guided by a new idea of global exchange, were born. Designed without the old steps or setbacks, these towers reached over 1,260 feet, the tallest pair anywhere. Their construction required new technology. Digging deep into the land beside the river, builders used a slurry wall to hold back water while they worked. When finished in 1973, the towers divided opinion. Some missed the detail of older buildings. Others admired their strength and confidence. No matter the thoughts, they could not be ignored. They became both a symbol of business and of national spirit. For nearly 30 years, the towers gave the skyline its shape. People traveled from everywhere to look from their peaks, to dine in the sky, or just to stand below and look up at the impossible. Then, on a morning in September 2001, the Manhattan skyline was forever changed, not by choice, but by heartbreak. In less than 2 hours, the Twin Towers fell in ash and twisted beams. Thousands died, and the skyline lost its anchor. The attack struck more than the city's shape. It cut to its very heart. Where once the towers stood, a void remained. The city mourned, and photographs showed an emptiness that words couldn't fill. Lower Manhattan became a wound, an absence marking loss. In those first days, work at the site was all about rescue, recovery, and respect. Steel and stone were cleared, but no new building began. The city took a rare moment to pause, to grieve, remember, and consider what might come next. Could anything ever fill that gap? Could the city return, or should the loss remain in the open, honored in its absence? Years passed. The space became sacred, but ideas also grew. Eventually, a plan was chosen, not to copy what was lost, but to renew, to blend memory with new life. In 2003, the site's new vision was chosen, including a memorial and a new tower. One World Trade Center, sometimes called the Freedom Tower, took shape on the site's northwest corner. At 1,776 feet, it echoed the year of America's birth. Tallest in the Western world, it was not just an answer to loss, but a promise to endure. When it opened in 2014, gleaming with shifting light, the tower did not try to erase the past, but let it reflect in every pane. Next to it, the 9/11 memorial filled 2 deep pools with ceaseless water, every victim's name present in bronze. The new skyline took shape slowly. Other buildings rose, each modern, sharp, and suited to its time. Together, they show not just a city rebuilt, but one that has learned, that honors memory while reaching for tomorrow. Here was resilience, the deep truth that even in sorrow, the city would not stay low. Today, Manhattan's skyline is more than an outline against the sun. It's a living record of struggle, ambition, and change. Perhaps no other city view carries so much meaning, reflected in history, culture, and a million stories. To sketch the skyline on a page is to recall the dreamers, builders, ironworkers, and families who have shaped and reshaped New York. And the skyline is still alive. In recent years, the tallest buildings are not downtown, but along Midtown's so-called Billionaires' Row. Slender, soaring homes for the wealthiest, built like needles into the sky. Some see inequity in their rise. Others see the peak of ingenuity. On the city's far west, new clusters of towers now lift old rail yards skyward. New neighborhood, new corporate dreams, more glass, more steel. And always, the old towers hold fast. The Empire State shines by night. The Chrysler glows at dawn, and One World Trade stands in solemn memory. If you want to know the real heart of New York, find its skyline. More than any statue or monument, it stands as the city's true face, rising and falling, changing yet always reaching. For here, the sky has never been the limit. It is simply the next step.